Have until end of business today to vacate your office, Marcus said, his voice flat and businesslike, as if he were canceling a lunch reservation rather than firing the woman who had built his career from nothing. Security will walk you out. Ivy Callahan stood very still at the head of the conference table in the law firm she had co-founded 11 years ago, feeling the weight of 14 pairs of eyes on her back. Some of her colleagues looked at the floor, others watched with expressions she couldn't quite read. Only 2 people in that room seemed comfortable. Marcus Webb, her husband of 6 years and managing partner, who sat with his arms crossed and his chin tilted up the way he always did when he had already decided something, and beside him, 3 chairs down, Sophia Renner, the firm's youngest senior associate, who pressed her lips together in a line that was almost, but not quite, a smile. On what grounds? Ivy asked. Marcus lit a folder across the polished table. Conduct unbecoming a partner. Misuse of client accounts. It's all documented. Ivy didn't touch the folder. She didn't need to. She had seen the drafts 4 months ago when Marcus had accidentally left his laptop open on the kitchen counter, and she had glanced at the screen while pouring her morning coffee. She had stopped pouring. She had stood there for a very long time. This is wrong, said Henry Osei, the firm's head of litigation. He was one of the few people in the room who looked genuinely angry rather than uncomfortable. Ivy's client management has always been exemplary. Every audit has said so. Your concern is noted, Marcus said, not looking at Henry. He turned back to Ivy. Do you have anything to say? Ivy looked at her husband. She had loved this man. She had believed in him when he was a second-year associate at another firm who couldn't keep a client for longer than 6 months. She had brought him into Callahan and Webb, given him the firm's name, built his reputation alongside her own. She had thought they were building something together. She could have said many things right then. She could have told everyone in that room about the months of evidence she had been collecting. The unauthorized wire transfers, the shell company Marcus had set up in Delaware, the relationship with Sophia that had started based on the hotel records her private investigator had compiled about 22 months ago. But that wasn't the plan. I have nothing to say, Ivy replied, except this. I hope you've thought carefully about what you're doing, Marcus. Something moved across his face. A flicker. Gone before she could name it. Then Sophia shifted in her seat and Marcus straightened and his expression went smooth and final again. End of business today, he repeated. Starting now. Ivy nodded once. She gathered nothing because there was nothing left to gather. She had quietly moved everything that mattered over the previous 3 months, a few files at a time, folders in her bag on the way to client lunches. She walked toward the door, and the room was so silent she could hear the ventilation system humming above the dropped ceiling. As she crossed the office floor, people looked up from their desks and then quickly looked away. News traveled fast in a firm of 80 people. Someone had already told the paralegals. She could see it in the way they watched her pass, the guilty, sad attention of people who knew something had been done to someone who didn't deserve it. She reached the elevator and pressed the button. Ivy. She turned. Henry had followed her. He looked tired and furious in equal measure. Everyone knows this is fabricated. Everyone. I know, Ivy said. She wanted to tell him to wait, that it would make sense soon. But she couldn't. Not yet. She rode the elevator down 12 floors, walked through the marble lobby of the building her grandmother had left her, the building that housed Callahan and Webb, and had never, under any version of the partnership agreement Marcus had signed, belonged to him, and sat in her car in the parking garage for exactly 4 minutes before calling her attorney. It happened, she said when Sandra Marsh picked up. Then we moved tonight, Sandra said. There was no surprise in her voice because Sandra had known this was coming. Sandra had helped Ivy prepare for it. The building management letter goes out in the morning. I'll have the partnership dissolution filed before noon. And the DA's office confirmed they're ready to move on the financial crimes piece as soon as you give the word. Give the word, Ivy said. She drove to her friend Claudette's house instead of home. She could not be in the house she shared with Marcus. Not tonight, not with everything still coiled this tightly inside her chest. Claudette opened the door before Ivy even knocked and pulled her into the kind of hug that doesn't require explanation. They sat in the kitchen with tea and the remains of a rotisserie chicken, and Ivy told Claudette everything about the day. Marcus's voice. Flat and certain. Sophia's almost smile. The way Henry looked like he might say something and then didn't. The sound of her own heels on the floor as she walked out. Tomorrow, Claudette said, he's going to walk into that building and find out he made the worst mistake he has ever made in his life. I know. How do you feel? Ivy thought about it honestly, like I've been holding my breath for 4 months. And I still haven't exhaled. Her phone buzzed on the table. A text from Marcus. "No hard feelings. This is a business decision. I hope you land well." She showed it to Claudette, who stared at it for a moment. "Don't respond," Claudette said. "Let him feel like he won. The next 24 hours will be so much better if he's completely blindsided." Ivy put her phone face down and tried to eat something. 6 months earlier, Ivy had been in the middle of a deposition when her assistant texted her that Marcus had taken an unscheduled call in the private conference room and asked not to be disturbed. That was unusual. Marcus liked to be disturbed, liked the sense of being in demand, but Ivy had finished the deposition and not thought much more about it until that evening, when she went back to the office to pick up a brief and found Marcus's laptop open on the conference table. Its screen still lit. She hadn't meant to look. She had just been reaching past it for the brief, and the subject line of the email was right there. The Renner situation. Keep this off the firm account. Ivy had sat down very slowly in the nearest chair. What she found over the next 2 hours was not just an affair, though the affair was there too. The texts, the hotel confirmations, the references to Sophia as S in an email chain with an account she didn't recognize. What she found, buried in a second email thread, was something worse. Marcus had been siphoning client retainers into a management LLC he had created without her knowledge, skimming operating fees, rerouting billing overages. Over the previous 18 months, based on the figures she was seeing, he had redirected approximately $1.4 million that belonged to their clients and, by extension, to both of them. She had taken photographs of everything. She had forwarded the relevant files to her personal email. She had sat in the darkened conference room for a long time after that, very still, the way you sit when the floor is moved and you need to wait for it to settle before you trust it again. Then she had called Sandra. Sandra Marsh was 62 years old, had been a partner at a white shoe firm for 20 years before going solo, and had a reputation for being absolutely unbothered by things that would rattle most attorneys. She had listened to Ivy for 45 minutes without interrupting. "You own the building," Sandra had said when Ivy finished. "Yes. Tell me exactly what the partnership agreement says about use of firm premises." Ivy had quoted it from memory because she had written it. Sandra had been quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Okay. Here's what we do." What they did was thorough. Sandra brought in a forensic accountant named Peter Dace, who spent 6 weeks quietly auditing the firm's accounts. Peter was methodical and calm and delivered his findings in a bound report that was 63 pages long. The figure at the top was $1.4 million. The documentation supporting it was airtight. Ivy also hired an investigator, a former federal agent named Constance Webb, no relation, who specialized in white-collar fraud. Constance tracked the Delaware LLC, identified the bank accounts Marcus used to move money, documented the timeline of transfers. She also, at Ivy's request, documented the relationship with Sophia, including evidence that Marcus had accelerated Sophia's promotion and steered her onto high-value cases as part of an arrangement that created significant legal exposure for the firm. For 4 months, Ivy had gone to work and behaved exactly as she always had. She took client meetings. She argued a motion in federal court that she won. She attended the firm's holiday party and stood next to Marcus in photographs and thanked people for coming. At night, she and Sandra revised the plan. The plan had one essential requirement. Marcus had to move first. He had to try to remove her, because only when he tried to remove her, a partner who owned the building the firm operated in, whose name appeared first on the partnership documents, who had originated 60% of the firm's top clients, would he fully expose himself. A preemptive strike from Ivy would look like a marital dispute. A counterattack was something else, so she had waited. And Marcus, who had never been as careful as he believed himself to be, had moved exactly when she expected him to. Ivy arrived at the building the next morning at 8:15. She wore a charcoal blazer her grandmother had given her. She had taken extra care with everything that morning, not out of vanity, but because the way you present yourself at the beginning of a consequential day matters. The building's security desk was staffed by Franklin, who had worked the morning shift for 9 years and who greeted Ivy by name every single day. "Good morning, Miss Callahan." "Mr. Callahan." Webb's office sent over a notice that your access was suspended. "Check your email from building management," Ivy said. "You should have received updated instructions this morning." Franklin checked. His eyebrows went up. "My apologies," he said, and handed her a visitor badge before she even asked for one. "You're cleared." Ivy rode the elevator to the 12th floor. The doors opened and she walked through the office with her head straight and her pace even. People noticed. Conversations paused. She walked directly to the main conference room where Sandra and Henry and 3 of the firm's senior partners were already seated, along with 2 representatives from the building management company. She sat at the head of the table. Marcus arrived at 8:55. She could see him through the glass wall, walking the way he always walked, with the particular confidence of a man who expects rooms to reconfigure themselves around him. Sophia was a few steps behind. Marcus was laughing at something on his phone. Then he saw the conference room. His step broke. He ended the call. He came to the door and opened it. "What is this?" he said. "I didn't schedule a meeting." "I did," Ivy said. Her voice was completely level. "Sit down, Marcus. You don't have the authority to." "She does," Sandra said, standing. "Mr. Webb, I represent Ms. Callahan in her capacity as sole owner of the property at this address, as senior founding partner of Callahan and Webb, and is the complainant in a pending criminal matter. I need to walk you through some changes in the firm's situation." Marcus's face went through several expressions. He sat down. Sandra placed a document in front of him. "Callahan and Webb operates on a lease. The lease is held by Ivy Callahan personally, through a family trust established by her late grandmother. That lease is not transferred to the partnership, is not divisible, and contains a termination clause that allows Ms. Callahan to end the tenancy with 30 days' notice. She is exercising that clause today." You can't. The partnership agreement," Sandra continued, as if he hadn't spoken, "provides that in the event of documented misconduct by either partner, the non-offending partner may dissolve the partnership and retain originating client relationships. We have documented misconduct." She placed Peter Dockey's 63-page report in the center of the table. $1.4 million redirected from client accounts over 18 months. The forensic accounting is thorough. The DA's office has had a copy since yesterday afternoon. Marcus looked at the report. He looked at Ivy. "You knew," he said. It wasn't a question. "For 4 months," Ivy said. "When I fired you yesterday, you didn't fire me," Ivy said. "You attempted to remove a founding partner from a firm she owns, operating in a building she owns, based on fabricated charges designed to cover up your theft from our clients. What you actually did was trigger the misconduct clause." The room was very quiet. "I'm calling for an immediate vote on partnership dissolution," Ivy said, looking at the assembled partners, "with all client relationships and originating credits reverting to their originating partner, which in 60% of cases is me. All in favor?" Every hand went up except Marcus's. "The motion carries," Sandra said. "Mr. Webb, you are hereby removed as managing partner of Callahan and Webb, effective immediately. You will return all firm property by close of business and vacate the premises by end of day. Security will assist you." "Ivy," Marcus's voice had changed. The certainty was gone from it. "Please, we can talk about this. There's a version of this that doesn't have to end like this. The version where you didn't steal from our clients," she said. "Or the version where you weren't sleeping with Sophia Renner for almost 2 years?" The room absorbed this. Several people looked at Sophia's empty chair. She had been asked to wait outside when the meeting started. "I made mistakes," Marcus said. "I know that. But 11 years, Ivy, that has to count for something." "It does," she said. "It's why I gave you the chance to conduct yourself with some dignity right now. Please don't waste it." He looked around the room for an ally, found none, and stood. "End of business today," Ivy said quietly. "That's what you gave me yesterday. I'm extending you the same courtesy." She watched him walk out. He didn't look at anyone. The criminal case moved quickly. The DA's office had found the forensic accounting thorough and the documentation from Constance's investigation comprehensive. They charged Marcus with wire fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and 3 counts of client theft. His attorney tried to negotiate a deferred prosecution agreement. The DA's office declined. Sophia was charged separately as an accessory for her role in routing 2 of the transfers through client billing codes she managed. She hired her own attorney and began cooperating immediately. Ivy filed for divorce the same week the charges were announced. Her family law attorney, a precise and unsentimental woman named Barbara Cho, had been reviewing the prenuptial agreement since Ivy's first call to Sandra 4 months earlier. "He gets nothing from the firm, nothing from the building, and nothing from your family trust," Barbara told her. "The marital assets are the house and the joint accounts. Given the infidelity and the criminal charges, we can argue he's in breach of the marital agreement's fidelity clause. Our position is he takes the car and whatever's in his personal savings and calls it done." Marcus's attorney reached out within 2 weeks. They met in Barbara's conference room. Marcus looked like someone who had been sleeping badly for a long time. His suit was impeccable, because Marcus would always have an impeccable suit, but his eyes were tired in a way that no dry cleaning could fix. "My client is prepared to settle," his attorney said. "Your client stole $1.4 million from our shared business and conducted a 2-year affair with a subordinate," Barbara replied. "My client is prepared to be reasonable, given those facts." Marcus spoke directly to Ivy. "I did love you. I want you to know that. I believe you thought you did," Ivy said, "but love doesn't look like what you did." He signed the settlement documents 20 minutes later. Ivy watched his hand as he wrote his name. It was steady, and she was surprised by how sad that made her. That he had steadied himself, that even at the end, he was performing composure. She wondered if he had ever not been performing, with her, with anyone. After he left, Barbara said, "You okay?" "I don't know yet," Ivy said, which was the honest answer. She had been seeing a therapist named Dr. Amara Solis since the second week after she found the emails. Dr.3. Solis had helped her understand something she kept circling back to, which was that the hardest part wasn't the betrayal itself, it was the retroactive uncertainty, the wondering which moments had been real, the re-examining of 11 years of memories, looking for what she had missed. "You didn't miss it because you were careless," Dr. Solis had told her. "You missed it because he was deliberate. That's different." Marcus was sentenced 8 weeks later. He pled guilty to 2 counts of wire fraud and 1 count of client theft. The judge sentenced him to 30 months in federal prison plus full restitution. His law license was suspended pending permanent revocation. His career in law was over. Ivy was not in the courtroom for the sentencing. She had attended the victim impact hearing, given her statement, said what she needed to say. She didn't need to see the sentence handed down. She had Claudette text her from the gallery, 30 months. Restitution in full. It's done. Ivy was at her desk when the text arrived. She sat with it for a few minutes. Then she got back to work. Rebuilding the firm was, in certain ways, the easiest part because Ivy was very good at her work and had always been the one who actually knew how the firm ran. She renamed it. The web was gone. It was Callahan Law now, which was what it had been before Marcus arrived, before she had let sentiment put his name on the door of something that had always been hers. She brought Henry in as managing partner. She hired a new senior associate away from a competing firm, a woman named Brielle Vasquez, who had been looking for somewhere that would actually promote her, which Callahan Law now demonstrably would. She implemented an anonymous reporting system for ethics concerns, overhauled the client billing review process, and had every client account independently audited and reconciled. The clients stayed, most of them. A few left in the confusion of the news coverage, and she couldn't blame them. But the majority called or emailed to say they were staying, that they had always been Ivy's clients really, that they wanted to know how to help. She called each of them personally. "I know this has been disruptive," she told them, one by one. "I want to make it right. And I want to be very clear about what this firm is going to be going forward." About 3 months into the rebuild, Henry knocked on her door and mentioned that a consultant had been recommended to her by one of their board members, someone who helped organizations restructure their culture after a leadership crisis. His name was Desmond Park. Ivy was expecting someone who would hand her a framework in a PowerPoint deck. What she got was a quiet, observant man in his early 40s who spent the first 30 minutes of their meeting asking her questions and saying very little and then said, "You're not just dealing with a structural problem. The people who work here watched leadership fail them. That takes a specific kind of repair." "What kind?" Ivy asked. "Consistent, slow, and honest," he said. "No shortcuts." She hired him on the spot. Desmond began with listening sessions, one-on-ones with staff at every level of the firm. He was thorough and unhurried, and people trusted him quickly, which Ivy suspected was partly because he looked like he was actually listening rather than waiting for his turn to talk. After 3 weeks, he presented her with a summary. She read it twice. "They're loyal to you," he told her during the debrief, "but they're watching to see if you mean what you say. The culture you're describing, collaborative, transparent, safe, they want it. They're just not sure yet if they believe it. What do I need to do? Keep doing what you're doing. And be patient. Trust gets rebuilt in small moments, not announcements." They fell into a rhythm. Weekly check-ins that usually ran long because Ivy kept asking questions and Desmond kept having things worth saying. She found herself rearranging other things to protect those hours. She started to notice, with some irritation at herself, that she was looking forward to them. "You're working too hard," he told her one afternoon, 4 months in. "I'm aware," she said. I don't mean that as a scheduling observation. I mean that you've been in survival mode for a long time, and survival mode is very good at keeping you functional and very bad at letting you actually recover. When did you last do something that had nothing to do with the firm? Ivy thought about it. I took a walk last Sunday. Desmond looked at her. A long walk, she added. I'm going to ask you something that's outside the scope of a consulting engagement, he said. Tell me if I've overstepped. But would you want to have dinner sometime? Not about the firm. Just dinner. Ivy was quiet for a moment. She had not been thinking about this. She had been very deliberately not thinking about this. I need you to know I'm still in the middle of things, she said. The divorce isn't fully closed. I'm still processing a lot of what happened. I know, he said. I'm not asking for anything complicated, just dinner. Okay, she said, just dinner. It was excellent. He took her to a small Moroccan restaurant in a neighborhood she didn't know well, and they talked for 3 hours about everything except the firm. His daughter Zara, who was 9, and obsessed with marine biology. Ivy's grandmother, who had built the building they both now worked in, what they had each wanted to be before they became what they were. He made her laugh 4 times, which she counted because it surprised her. At the end of the evening, he walked her to her car and did not try to kiss her. He just said, I had a really good time, and waited. Me too, she said. Let's do it again. They did. Slowly, carefully, in the way that people do when they have both been through something and understand the value of not rushing. Desmond's daughter Zara decided after meeting Ivy twice that she was acceptable, which Desmond relayed with great solemnity as the highest possible endorsement. Claudette, when Ivy told her, said, I knew from the way you said his name. I don't say his name any particular way. You do, Claudette said. You say it like it's the period at the end of a sentence. Like something settled. Callahan Law had its best year on record, 18 months after the restructuring. The firm won a significant class action case that made national legal press. Ivy gave 3 interviews in which she spoke carefully and honestly about rebuilding trust in an organization after leadership failure, not because she wanted to talk about Marcus, but because she thought there was something useful in not pretending it hadn't happened. She also quietly started a legal aid initiative. 1 afternoon per week, Callahan Law provided free consultations for people navigating financial abuse in their personal relationships. People who had lost access to joint accounts, people trying to understand agreements they'd signed without fully knowing what they were signing. It had been Ivy's idea, and she led it herself, and it grew faster than anything else the firm did that year. One evening she was reviewing intake forms when Henry knocked. There's a call for you, he said. Personal line. It's Marcus. Ivy set down the intake form. He's out, Henry said. Apparently his attorney negotiated early release. Ivy picked up the phone. I heard the firm is doing well, Marcus said. He sounded older. The performance was still there, but it was thinner now, like fabric worn through at the elbows. I wanted to say congratulations. What do you want, Marcus? I'm trying to rebuild, he said. I'm working at a consulting firm. Small, nothing like what we had. I thought maybe we could get coffee sometime. Talk. There's a lot I should have said. There's nothing you need to say to me, Ivy said. I understood what happened. I've moved on from it. What you do with the rest of your life is genuinely up to you, but it doesn't involve me. Ivy. Take care of yourself, Marcus. Don't call this number again. She hung up. She sat for a moment, feeling the familiar old anger move through her, and then let it move on. She called Desmond. Come over, he said when she explained. Zara made soup. It's aggressively salted, but she's very proud of it. Ivy laughed. I'll be there in 30 minutes. On a Thursday in April, 2.5 years after the conference room, Ivy stood at a lectern at a legal industry dinner and accepted an award for ethics in firm leadership. It was not a large award, a glass thing, modest, presented before the main course, but the room was full of attorneys who had watched what she had done and how she had done it, and when she spoke, they listened. She thanked Henry and Brielle and the staff of Callahan Law. She thanked Sandra and Barbara. She thanked Claudette, who was in the audience and who rolled her eyes affectionately when Ivy said her name. She said something about how the worst thing that ever happened to her professionally had turned out to be clarifying, that sometimes you don't know what you're actually building until something tears it down and makes you look at the foundation. And what she had found at the foundation of Callahan Law was something solid and worth keeping. She did not mention Marcus by name. Afterward, standing in the hotel lobby waiting for a car, she checked her phone and found a text from Desmond, saw the live stream. You were wonderful. Zara says you deserve a bigger trophy. She wants to know if we can get ice cream tomorrow to celebrate. Ivy smiled at her phone in the lobby of a hotel full of attorneys she barely knew, standing alone, wearing a dress she had bought for herself, holding a glass award that belonged to her. She typed back, "Tell Zara yes, and tell her I think so too about the trophy." The car arrived. She got in. Whatever Marcus was doing tonight, she genuinely didn't know and hadn't for a long time. It had nothing to do with her. He had tried to take her name off the door, her clients from their files, her confidence from her own understanding of what she had built. Instead, what he had done was clear the ground. She had built something better on it, something with her name on it and no one else's, something she understood down to the foundation because she had laid it herself. The city moved past the car windows. Ivy watched it and felt, for perhaps the first time in years, completely at ease.